Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Barbarian Banter. I am your host, Jonas Kilker.
I'm your co-host, Dane Miller-Haas.
Our guest today is a writer, creator, journalist, entrepreneur, and mystic who blends his wide-ranging skill set with his passion and knowledge of the esoteric and the unseen. He is the founder and alchemizer of the jewelry brand called Aquari that Dane and I are both proudly wearing, and it contains, like he himself, more than meets the eye. Orpheus, thank you for coming on the show.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. Good morning, barbarian gentlemen. Thank you for
Yes.
having me.
Oh, it's a
I'm very
pleasure. It's a
excited.
pleasure. Yeah, like I said, we've been wanting to have this conversation for a long time. We've kind of existed in similar spaces online for a while, so I had known of you, and then finally, when Zach started kind of connecting us, I started really looking through a lot of your content, and I think that the best part about it is the fact that you're taking ideas and concepts that so many people kind of talk about in, like we were discussing, like a memeified way or just a very shallow sort of understanding of myth and these sorts of things. And you are just a wealth of information on these topics to the point where it's like you need not look anywhere else for the most part, at least from what I've seen. And so I wanted to say, first of all, what is your kind of what's your approach to the myths, like the Hyperborean, the Atlantean myths, like we'll get into? Was this something that you had always been interested in from childhood, or was there sort of an initiation process?
So I was always interested in myths, particularly Greek and Norse myths, from a child. When I was a child, I used to spend a lot of time in Greece every summer, from
Nice.
like the day I don't know I was 16 months old to about like 16 years old,
Wow.
because my mom and my uncle had a little house, like a holiday house out there. So we used to go there very often. And obviously, it was on a Greek island called Chios, where the mastic gum comes from. And just being on a Greek island, you just are saturated in the place that the myths really were written. At least Greek myths were written and take place. And then I was raised with my mum reading them to me. Theseus, Perseus, Hercules. And then slightly later in childhood, I got into Norse mythology, just as stories. In Europe, we didn't, I'm 33 now, so when I was a kid, Marvel was not a thing.
Right.
Actually, I hadn't breached over into Europe. So we had like myth comic books, or Tintin was a big one, or Asterix and Obelix, which is
Oh,
something
yeah.
I told you guys about.
Yeah.
I don't
I
know.
get
American
frequent
audiences,
comparisons.
American audiences might not know about it, but Asterix and Obelix was a very big thing in Europe. It was written back in like I don't know, the 30s maybe.
Yeah.
And I had a stack of 15 to 20 of the classic like Asterix comic books. And every single one is like Asterix, or it starts with Asterix the Gaul. So for people who don't know, Asterix is a comic book about a little village in Gaul during the Roman times, during Caesar's conquest of Gaul. And it was the one village that could never be conquered by the Romans. And Asterix and Obelix were two main characters. And there was a druid whose name was Getafix. And all the names like Get a Fix. And
Get a fix,
the fishmonger was called Unhygienics, and Obelix is called Obelix because he carries around these big menhirs. If you know what menhirs are, like these huge stone
Oh,
pillars that
like
are
an
found.
obelisk.
Yeah, like an obelisk,
Yeah.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I mentioned that to you guys because I thought it was funny because you guys kind of like they're the
Have the
barbarians.
look. Yeah.
Yeah,
Have
yeah.
the-
I
have the look
frequently
of,
get comments that are like, right out of Asterix and Obelix. Or Obelix, jeez.
yeah.
Funny.
But then, like my modern interest in, or my updated interest in Hyperborea specifically, and the Hyperborean mythos was an initiation, a self a self-initiation because there is no like school of Hyperborea.
Right.
But it occurred over time in my adult life because I got very harshly red pilled when I was like 19 years old. I was in the USA because I was at college in the US in Virginia, and at the time, I was there on a sports scholarship and just studying English and journalism.
Really?
But, yeah, and
It was American football too?
no, I was there on a rugby scholarship.
Oh,
Actually.
rugby.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's
I thought
Yeah.
I
awesome.
thought I saw a clip of American football, but that makes sense. That is rugby.
No, I did play it, but this is the.
Oh, you
I have
did?
I have a strange like backstory. I did actually play American football in England between the ages of 13 and 18, and it was because of playing American football that I became infatuated with the idea of going to America, and I ended up playing for the Great Britain under 18s.
Wow.
So like, yeah, I was really obsessed. Like I was completely obsessed with playing sport. But I was playing rugby at the same time at school, and football as well, soccer. Anyway, I was at university in America and I got very dramatically red-pilled. Funnily enough, the course of the events of the way it occurred was I had a class based on Cormac McCarthy. So I like reading the whole anthology of Cormac McCarthy and writing papers on it and that kind of stuff. It was like a high-level English class, like in a 395, English 395 or something like this. And I read Blood Meridian, and then Blood Meridian was like this sort of mind-breaking book for me. And my professor, who was this really sweet old Southern lady, she kind of took a shining to me. I don't know exactly why, but because I was one of the only people who like was actually sort of interested in the topic material. And she said, "Oh, I want you to write a critique about a critique on Blood Meridian." So a previous scholar in a different school had written a critique about Blood Meridian and how the book written by Cormac McCarthy was a Gnostic allegory, particularly involving the concept of the Demiurge. Right? And so in Gnosticism, the Demiurge is this sort of false creator god. And the critique explained how the judge, so Judge Holden in the book, was a sort of epithet for the Demiurge. And so I didn't know what the Demiurge was, and I didn't know what Gnosticism was. Like, it was very evergreen at the time. But I had to do research for my paper. And so it was through doing research, and this was back in like 2014, 2015 maybe. I was doing research that I sort of stumbled into a deep, deep rabbit hole about like with conspiracy theories and like ancient religions, spirituality, cults, and human trafficking, and everything that actually now has become sort of mimetically infamous, especially on Twitter and Instagram with the Epstein files and all of this. So I was like there on kind of at the beginnings of it, at least what it felt like. It wasn't the beginnings, but pretty early, where people didn't really know what this stuff was. And it kind of ruined my ability to conceive of the world in a healthy way. Because,
what was your like sort of metaphysical framework for the world at the time? What kind of a viewpoint were you operating from before that? Were you like atheist, agnostic?
I would say I was never atheist. I was raised by a kind of holistic mother, in the sense that I was raised with sort of holistic health being like a very big deal, homeopathy specifically. And so I never had the standard medical framework. And so I was always like in this different channel of what reality was like. Like, you go to school and you'd have to get your vaccinations at school and stuff like that. And I was always exempted from these things. And so it was kind of strange growing up because I was like, I don't know why I'm not doing the same thing as everyone else. Like, there was no ibuprofen. There was no like standard medications ever.
Yeah.
I was really, which now I'm very
Grateful for. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah. Because I skipped out on a lot of childhood toxicity that a lot of people, unfortunately, have gone through. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
so
I
that
went through the
informed.
gauntlet of it myself.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. We're healing from it. We're detoxing.
Yeah.
We're doing everything we can.
That's excellent. So that informed my worldview in a certain way. I never was raised Christian. We didn't go to church. I just always sort of had a spiritual mindset. I believed in the idea of reincarnation since, I don't know, as long as I can remember, without anyone sort of telling me why. I used to have dreams when I was a kid where like I would be dead and I would be in some sort of big room with a kind of screen in front of me, and on the screen would be all of these potential life paths that I could choose.
Interesting.
And that's like when I was like 7 years old or something. So I used to have that as a recurring dream.
Yeah.
And so I never had any sort of particular traditional spiritual framework. It was all just my own intuition. I think I was fortunate enough to be allowed to, I wasn't inculcated into any particular framework,
Right.
which was very good. It allowed me to sort of stay in touch with my inner self and my inner knowing and my inner sort of intuition and assumptions. But then at the same time, on the other end of the spectrum, not having any frameworks as you grow up can be challenging as well, because you need form in order to contain all that energy.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah. That's one thing that I am very grateful for with my upbringing. At least gave me like I was raised Christian. My parents were occasional churchgoers, but I was at least brought up with like something in mind, to the point where it got me to start asking questions early. And my parents were always willing to field questions from a very honest perspective of like, well, like we don't know. This is what we believe, sort of thing. So it was never like I was never taught anything from like a very dogmatic perspective. And because of that, when I became a little bit older in my teenage years, I started exploring things for myself, and I sort of considered myself an agnostic for a long time, just because I didn't really know, which path I wanted to go down. And one of the things that kind of led me towards reading the Bible and sort of rediscovering an idea of Christianity was also Gnosticism, funnily enough, because I would see these like debates online between Christians and Gnostics, and I'm like, oh, I've never even heard of Gnostic before. Who is this? But anyways, we'll certainly get into that. Sorry, did I cut you off, Dane?
No, well, it's kind of related to what I was about to say with Gnosticism. First time I was exposed to anything kind of Orpheus, as you said, mimetically, I was on some site when I was 18, maybe 19, and I had no idea about any kind of mysticism or anything. I'd grown up Christian, but very, very kind of an evangelical kind of Christian, and that was really my only spiritual experience. And I saw a meme, a Gnostic meme, and the Spurdo Demiurge. It's like the Pepe kind of Demiurge, like
yeah.
the comic one, and I thought it was a sunflower. I didn't realize it was a lion's head on a serpent. I thought it was like this cosmic sunflower, and I had no idea what it was referencing or what like the beliefs behind it were. But I was fascinated by this cosmic sunflower that people were talking about cryptically, and so I didn't understand until years later, and I finally actually learned what the Demiurge was and that it was not a sunflower. But it's kind of fascinating because that image kind of stuck in my head. And I would think whenever I saw it, I was really drawn to it and I didn't know why. This kind of hidden, I knew it was referencing something I wasn't
deep.
Initiated into.
Yeah.
So there was that kind of curiosity. I knew it wasn't just like a silly character, but it was until much later that I actually learned. But like you said, a lot of these topics have become mimetically, for better or worse, infamous, and a lot of people have been exposed to them that otherwise would have never been.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what it is about the algorithm, but it's like all I get when I'm on Instagram. Like it's just like spiritual warfare. Bah, bah. Um, I don't know. The AI is just reading my mind. Get
Yeah,
out.
well, they know that you'll watch, and so that's the thing is like they're but one
But I don't. I
I
don't actually I've known about this stuff for so long
oh, so
that
you
it's like,
purposely try to not to get the algorithm
yeah.
to
Now it's
change.
just like I can't. Like, don't tell me something I already know.
Yeah,
Occasionally, and I don't mean that in a big-headed way. I don't, because occasionally
yeah,
I
no, no,
get
no.
like stuff that I see, which is really interesting. And I would actually, I want to probably say outset, I'm not a Gnostic. Like I don't believe in this the idea of a. Okay, well, I don't believe in the idea that the material world is evil and needs to be
Okay.
escaped from. And that is like the standard. That's what Christians will allege Gnostics or people who look at this sort of stuff as being like almost nihilists in a sense, because
Yeah,
the material
because
world is evil. You need to escape from it, but it's
yeah, correct.
that's not.
Gnosticism is almost like the taking that sort of idea of Christian fallenness like to the nth degree, right? We're so fallen and the world is so corrupt that it's to like abandon the material at all costs for the sake of the spiritual because that's the only enlightenment, salvation, gnosis, what have you.
Yeah, and there
Out
was
of
yeah. Go on, Dane. Sorry.
out of curiosity, and you can answer this after you get into what you were going to say. I was curious because I also really enjoyed Blood Meridian. What if you agreed with the critique or found value in it being the critique alleging it was a Gnostic story, or however they presented it? Do you agree with that then and now? 'Cause that's an interpretation I'd never heard before.
Yeah. So Judge Holden he in the story he's always drawing in his little ledger like everything that he comes across. So it's like this is the way the critique put it out. It's like he's trying to consume the world. And then, in the final scene, they have him like dancing naked, like this giant 7-foot baby, and it's like the most visceral scene imaginable. And I can't remember exactly how McCarthy words it, but he's sort of like he's dancing, and he's been dancing since the dawn of time. Carry on dancing forever. And so he is like beyond being this demiurge. He is like the emblem of the eternal return, the rounds of reoccurrence, which goes into the idea of their like reincarnation being some sort of soul trap that we are part of. And in Buddhism, it would be enlightenment would be to escape the rounds of reincarnation, and Judge Holden represents Saturn or the demiurge.
Trying to contain you in that continuous cycle.
Yeah, exactly. And the kid is the sort of the counter, he's the hero of the story, and the demiurge, and Judge Holden is the villain, and it's like that's the dichotomy you have: the kid being the child, the pure innocence, and he sort of travels along with Judge Holden for a certain extent until he eventually, if I remember correctly, is killed by the judge. If I'm remembering that correctly, can you?
It's not explicitly said what happens, but yes, he goes into, I believe it's a bathroom with Judge Holden, and someone opens the door and is aghast at whatever's seen, and right after that is the judge is dancing naked. So
Yeah.
it
So the kid is innocence, it's childlike wonder and awe. This when you're born into this world, and this is where I don't believe in original sin, for example. I don't I think that is again a false dichotomy or a control narrative, and so the lines between churchianity, Christianity, and Gnosticism are actually extremely blurred. Like there are ways in which you could say that many Christians are in fact Gnostics, without Gnostics in the sense that the world has fallen and evil, and so it's almost like people are like the Spider-Man meme, where they're all pointing at, like all the five Spider-Men are pointing at each other. It's like, you're the one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting. I've always thought that too, because like I've been reading a lot of C.S. Lewis recently, and one of the things that he talks about is sort of like the trying to remember the Latin, Felix peccatum Adam or something, the fortunate sin of Adam, because they consider it a fortunate sin because Adam and Eve sinned, greater things happened than would have ever happened if they had just remained ignorant in the garden. And so it's interesting because it kind of makes it a thing where it's like, okay, well, if it's a fortunate sin, then is it really fallen? Or was it the plan to begin with all along? Because I think that distinction is kind of important. It's like the connotation behind it, because the world exists as it is. Is our framework going to be this is one of a fallen, degenerate, subverted reality? Or is this simply reality, and the degeneracy, the subversion occurs within one's own mind, not the material world itself? And that was something that kind of made me go, okay, well, very clearly, like if different sects of Christianity, even the Orthodox and the Catholic, already have different interpretations of what the fallenness is the guilt inherited? Is it shame instead of guilt? X, Y, and Z? Then like, what are we really talking about here? What is the actual purpose of these stories to begin with? And that's why I think, as somebody who kind of grew up in this Christian worldview and has been immersed in it since I was a young kid, I hear something like when you're talking about the Hyperborean tradition, and that's something that sort of immediately resonates with me in a sense of like, yeah, there is something a little bit like deeper that chronological history or the regular Western mythos like doesn't really cover. And so I wanted to give you a chance to sort of talk about what Hyperborea is. I want to let people know, if they're listening, that you have 3 wonderful videos on your YouTube channel that I highly recommend that they go check out. But for the sake of being able to answer some questions here, can you quickly give us a sort of rundown on the origin of Hyperborea and its connection to Atlantis? Because I think that's something that kind of grounds us in chronology and more common mythology a little bit.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. So the origin in the historical record of Hyperborea is in ancient Greece, with writers like Herodotus and Pindar, and a few others. So 5th century BC,
Yeah.
I
I
believe.
think Pindar was even like 7th century
7th,
BC.
yeah.
It's quite old.
Yeah. And they talked about a mythical land, or at least we frame it as a mythical land beyond the north wind, as Hyperborea means literally. And it was spoken about to be in the north of Greece at least, and northwest. It's kind of up for debate.
Which, if you look at the map, that could be anywhere, according to the Greeks, right?
Exactly, it could be anywhere. And Atlantis is beyond the Pillars of Hercules, so
Yeah.
that's in the west, beyond the Strait of Gibraltar.
Broadly.
But that's in the historical record, at least. And we've got to frame the historical record as being very scarce. Like so much of Hellenic antiquity, history from that era, what we have is like 2%.
Yeah.
This is what scholars say. Scholars say like what we actually have is now 2% of what was actually probably written.
Yes.
Because of the burning of the Library of Alexandria, the fall of Rome, the passage of time, the Dark Ages,
and just the
obviously.
instability of scrolls as a writing style. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like there was a time and period when, almost in the same way that books now are being put on the internet, there was a time period where tablets were transferred to scrolls, and it was really just down to the scribes to decide what made that civilizational transference onto the new medium.
Yeah.
And
The deciders.
yeah, exactly, yeah. And these are the scribes of the library, Library of Alexandria or various other places. And so when we look at history, we're really looking at like what men decided to keep, and that would be based on their own proclivities and their own biases, or who was the victor at various particular times throughout history. So myth and history. I mean, history. I would say like we grapple with scant information, and we try to put together a decent linear timeline of how things occurred. But then, within that, any history is written by those who win wars, essentially. And so you can't, to be really intellectually honest, you can't say this is absolutely the truth at any particular time.
Yeah, never.
So with that said, Hyperborea, first mentioned by the Greeks in the polar north. I think Herodotus associated it with where amber was made, or the river, the Eridanus River.
That would be more like Scandinavian.
That would be the Baltics. So Estonia, Finland, so just sort of east of Scandinavia.
Gotcha.
Because that's where amber comes from. And so there's also like the Scythians come in here a little bit as well, but we don't have any written stuff from the Scythians. We just have what the Greeks wrote about them.
I think it was Herodotus who sort of tried to say that Pindar was tying the Hyperboreans to the Scythians, because he says that the Scythians are made up of many different tribes, and there's a more northern tribe of Scythians, because Scythian is just like kind of a cultural label, right? And he says there's a northern tribe of Scythians that we don't really know much about, and these are the Hyperboreans that Pindar is talking about, sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So they're already in Herodotus' time when he's writing about factual history. He's already sort of including this sort of like they are a mysterious people that we don't know of.
Yes, yeah, exactly. But the simple way to understand it is they come from the polar north, so that they lived in a polar homeland. There was an Indian Vedic scholar called Childlike who wrote a book called the Arctic Homeland of the Aryan people. So the Hyperboreans are associated with the Aryans. They're like their predecessors, if you will. The ancestral predecessors. And mythically speaking, the Greeks spoke about how the gods, certain gods and certain heroes went to Hyperborea. Apollo would go there every 19 years to rejuvenate, because then he would eat the golden apples from the Garden of Hesperides, which aligns with the golden apples in Norse mythology that keep the gods young. Hercules went there to collect the Olympic olive branch. Theseus went there, or Theseus and the Minotaur. So who killed the Gorgon? Perseus.
Perseus. Yes.
Perseus. So Perseus went there to get information about the island of the Gorgons, and Theseus also went there. But Apollo is the main god of the Hyperboreans. The Hyperboreans were bards and priests and priestesses of Apollo, essentially. And Apollo's mother, Leto, came from Hyperborea in Greek mythology.
So is the entire population of Hyperborea in this sense is a sort of they are people that are like intimately connected with the divine. They you said that they're all like priests and priestesses of this sort of divine order. Okay.
Yeah, they're like the Numenorians or the elves in Tolkien's work, basically.
Gotcha.
And this is where mythopoeia comes in, and I'll touch on that. But Pindar wrote that neither by ship nor by foot can you reach the lands of Hyperborea, which is sort of an insinuation that, one, it's destroyed, or two, it is a spiritual place rather than a physical place, or perhaps both.
Both.
So the way it's framed by the Greeks is this mythical land. And then how it came down into the modern age, there was Mercator who drew a map. He was one of the first to map the Arctic. He had
The Rupus Nigris map.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's in the 1500s. And this is where, in that map as well, there's Friesland as part of the Orlinda book, and the Frisian people, the Frisian people. So that, specifically, there is an island just outside of this, these four, where Hyperborea was, which is separated by four rivers, and it's like four pieces of land separated by four rivers. There's also an island there called Friesland, which doesn't exist on Google Maps. Friesland is the province in the Netherlands, and so there's an association there also. And then the next association, I'll stay on the myths right now before I come into then how it's trickled down to us in the 20th century. But in the myths, there's also the Tuatha De Danann, who of Irish mythology, who came from the west or from the north and landed on the Isles, and they brought with them like cosmic order and civilizational decree and how people should order their lives. And then there's a war between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians. And then in the same way in Norse mythology, exactly. Yeah, the sort of the native inhabitants, the early hominids of that area. So if we're staying with the mythic frame, then you also have the Aesir and the Vanir, also being associated with the Hyperboreans, and they also have a war with the Jotun, and then of course eventually with Loki, who is half Jotun, and so there's these bits and pieces from different European mythologies. Estonia has their own mythology as well, called the Kalevala. I can't remember exactly the story, but there is some crossover with this. And then finally the Vedic texts with the war of the Mahabharata. And so essentially in these mythic texts, Hyperborea is described as this place with, it was the golden age, it was ideal civilization, war and strife wasn't really a thing. People lived for very long times. There was 2 harvests in each year. This is described by Pindar, I believe. So this northern region was lush, so without ice. So if we're going to put it in some sort of geographic, archaeological context, perhaps this is like an antediluvian or pre-glacial northern homeland.
Right.
And it was from there that some catastrophe occurred. Could be wars, could be some sort of cosmic, as in celestial situation where there was a flash freezing, which caused migrations to occur southward. So then Hyperborea really crops back up in the 20th century with Julius Evola and Miguel Serrano. Julius Evola writes his assessment of what may have happened, which would have been the northern homeland being destroyed and there being, from their migrations southward in waves over, hundreds of years. Right. Not sort of all at once. One wave going down to the Americas, and one wave going down to Northern Europe and Eurasia.
Yeah.
And
that was interesting to me because when I was in college, I remember reading. It was in a Latino philosophy class, and we were reading an author named Jose Ortega y Gasset, and he talked about the root races. And to me, I was like, this sounds like Blavatsky, right?
Yeah.
And he basically says the exact same thing. He is like, there's the Atlantean root race. There is I can't remember what he called the other ones exactly, but sort of all the 4 races of the world, and one of them was Atlantean. And he compares those to not only the Europeans, but also the Indigenous Americans. And I was like, that's an entirely opposite grouping, but it's like, I wonder where that tradition is coming from. But if you think about it, yeah, the North Pole would be the one thing that if you were to sort of push the land masses a little closer, it's what's connecting them.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
and the Hopi Indians had like ancient myths of their own, talking about white giants coming from the north,
Yes.
and also others emerging from underground as well.
Emerging from underground. I just talked about, I was at the Grand Canyon, and there's lots of shared, it's like the Hopi, the Navajo, I'm forgetting the names of the other ones right now, but they all have this shared myth of coming from the underground, from the third world into the fourth world. Like, this is the fourth rendition, and they were escaping civilizational degeneracy and the disconnection from the gods and these sorts of things, the civilizational decline story, where they had to pack up and leave. And it's interesting how it's all the same story.
Yeah, it is all the same story. Or pack up or leave, or be forced to go into caves or underground because the outside world was not stable. The ecology was so unstable that you couldn't actually be outside. And in South America, they have the same stories. The Aztecs and the Mayans and the Incas have the
And
same
the Incas have
stories.
any
Yeah.
connections with that kind of myth
Yeah.
coming out of Europe.
Yeah, with the Incas, they're directly like two highly spiritual brother and sister emerge out of Lake Titicaca, like emerge from out of the water in Lake Titicaca to bring them knowledge of how to build civilization. So it's the same story repeated all over the ancient world.
Yeah.
So you've got these two streams of migration, and then Atlantis comes in because, well, first I would say that yes, in the Hyperborean mythos, there was a war that destroyed Hyperborea, and this war occurred between the Hyperboreans themselves. So there were two factions of the Hyperboreans, and one of them defected. And Serrano calls these two factions the loyal Siddhas, and Siddha is a Vedic term for like wise man, basically.
Okay.
The loyal Siddhas and the traitor Siddhas. And basically the traitor Siddhas, they could be understood to be like the dark Atlanteans, although there are two, like it's not clear if we're talking about one event or we're talking about two events or several events that occur in the same pattern throughout time. Like basically a civilizational decay that occurs as almost like a matter of fact of reality, and it has to be fought against. But essentially what happens is the traitor Siddhas, they side with the Demiurge. And the Demiurge in Hyperborean cosmology is understood to be like a cosmically aborted fetus. Right, meaning that it is an inorganic being that lacks ontology, but was created at the beginning of the world almost by accident. In Gnostic cosmology, Sophia is the 12th emanation of the Godhead, and Sophia becomes the Earth,
Right.
which is a completely rare occurrence. Like that had never happened in previous what's called anthropos, which is like human creations.
Right.
Right. So in Gnostic cosmology, there's been several previous anthroposes, like 9, I believe, and we are the 10th anthropos.
So it'd be like a
And
universal cycle?
Yeah.
Okay.
And Sophia became basically became so enamored with her creation that she sort of fell into it and became the world, essentially. Whereas you could imagine that these aeons, these emanations, these previous emanations, they were more like scientists in their creations, where they would have a petri dish that would evolve, but they would just be there observing it to see what happened. But Sophia which is the love of wisdom. She became so enamored that she sort of fell into the petri dish and started becoming the mold. That
or she
was
is
being
wisdom.
created.
She is wisdom that like generates the conscious wise man. Like that's what Homo sapien means, right? It's like wise sapien or something. I'm curious, in this cosmology, I know that there's already been sort of talk of the Aesir, the Vanir, the Greek gods as well. What is the sort of ultimate unifying cosmic entity? Is there like a singular sort of god that is overseen? Because, like, of course, before we have like Zeus, for example, we have Kronos, and then before Kronos, we have Uranus. And then, is there any sort of unifying principle tying all these things together?
Not that I can strictly understand.
Okay.
Like in Norse mythology, you have Gnundagap, which is the void of chaos, where basically two positive. You could think of it. There's so many ways to think of it because you can think of it in physics terms, where you have like positive and negative charge, basically colliding in the realm of chaos, which creates the world and
Right.
creates things. So then in Norse mythology, you have Alhumbra, which is the cosmic cow, and Ymir suckles from the teat of Alhumbra, suckles the milk, the cosmic milk, and then starts to like form the earth, and Ymir becomes the earth. So, in that way, you've got this because Ymir is the earth, but the source of Ymir is the female cow. In Gnostic cosmology, you've got Sophia, but there is also Thelete, like her like male component god.
Okay.
Sophia being the earth and Thelete being the nous with which man can think.
Okay. So there's not necessarily like a god that presides over, like one highest god that presides over all of creation. It's sort of just like an eternal essence that all things spring forth from, whether you call it God or not.
Yeah, and I guess in the Kabbalah they call it the unmanifested manifester. And in Gnostic, in standard Gnostic terms, they would say the monad, which is the one.
Monad. Right,
Yeah.
right. I've heard this term, yes. Okay.
And so, it's basically like, chaos, the primordial chaos, is filled with positive and negative, or male and female, ultimately. Positive and negative charge, not positive negative in some sort of
Yes,
ethical sense.
hierarchical way, yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyway, as a matter of fact of Sophia becoming the earth, the Demiurge was sort of accidentally created. And the Demiurge, and this is Gnostic cosmology, but this is how the Hyperborean wisdom kind of sees it as well. So the Demiurge is not an organic being. It is like an accidental inorganic glitch. And that's why he's the blind god in Gnostic cosmology. So he is, and he sees himself as the creator. Because he was kind of like the first accidental thing that existed whilst the earth was being formed. So Sophia, if you will, was forming herself. This like gnat or this like mosquito sort of arrived, which was the Demiurge, and then the Demiurge presided, like was watching the earth form, and then thought to himself, "Well, I did this." Yeah.
Oh, interesting. I'd never thought of it that way before. See, I had always, coming from the, like, what little I know, because I know the rabbit hole goes unfathomably deep, I had always understood, like, in the Christian Gnostic sense, that there was, like, a most high God that separated the waters above from the waters below and sort of brought order to the primordial chaos, those positive and negative charges that you were talking about, and brought about creation from that, because before there was... the earth was formless and void, but there was still like an earth. There was like a potential for creation. And so then there was some god that presided over that. But then in the Gnostic tradition, if I understand correctly, then like Yahweh is the demiurge that Christ is sort of speaking against, and the Father is actually something quite different. Is that about correct in the Gnostic sense? Okay.
Yeah. And in the Hyperborean law, it's the same principle. they like in Hyperborean law, you'd also it's assumed that Yahweh is also the Demiurge. But it does get even more complicated because the Demiurge is also associated with Saturn,
Right.
and then Saturn is considered this evil thing, right? And that's why in conspiracy circles they'll talk about like the Black Cube Saturn worshippers,
Yeah.
right? But Saturn was the original, the primordial sun, so the original like first principle of the Golden Age, and Saturn was turned to lead by the Demiurge.
Anti-alchemy.
Yes, exactly. So gold
Right.
was turned to lead, and so in a sort of alchemical mythopoetic sense, the Golden Age was then like turned into the
I see.
Kali Age.
I had always associated Saturn with the Demiurge himself, so that's a good distinction to draw.
Yeah, so it's more like the Demiurge is the chains around Saturn, and so Saturn has its rings.
Right.
But there are like some people theorize that, and I think this is mainstream physics, that at a certain point in the deep past, Saturn did not have any rings.
Yeah, well, I've even heard that there's an eternal sort of recurrence with that too, because it's like the rings around Saturn, from a strictly astronomical physics perspective, the rings around Saturn are like moons that Saturn once had that get drawn too close into its orbit and are pulverized and then turn into like these dust rings around it. But then over millions and millions of years, those dust particles collect and they form new moons again, and then they come too close to the orbit, they get shattered again, and it just keeps creating more and more rings. I can't remember if what I was watching said that there will ultimately be no rings left because it will be pulverized too thin, something like that. But yeah, there is also a cyclical thing to that as well.
Yeah, and that is the rounds of the eternal return, which is how Miguel Serrano calls it.
Fascinating.
So we live in a round essentially, and within this round, I also want to say, like, I don't necessarily believe any of this either.
Sure,
and
we're theorizing.
Just explaining.
We're throwing it out there.
Yeah. Just so you like your viewers don't think I'm like preaching to them some sort of cosmology. Like I'm telling them this is the truth. This is just what I've studied and have like pieced together and understood.
You'd have to be wearing a robe in order for that to be the case. You'd have to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Got a little like vaccine here. But then, so we exist in the round of the Kali Yuga, which is sort of the inverted. We're in like an inverted realm, where Saturn was chained, his golden essence was turned to lead, because the traitor Siddhas sided with the Demiurge in order to trap the Hyperborean spirit inside the Kali Yuga, inside the realm of experience.
And what is there? Sorry, go ahead, Dane.
It's earlier you'd mentioned Tolkien's world, and you have the Numenorians and the Elves, the Undying Lands, and it does remind me the whole loyalist traitor. It happens essentially in Tolkien's world. The Dark Numenorians, they start to worship Sauron, and they turn against their loyalist kin. I wonder how familiar he was with some of this, or if it's something that mythically he just kind of intuitively
Drew
picked
from.
upon.
Yeah.
Yes, that's a really good question. He did have access to the annals under the Library of Oxford, the Oxford, or it was Cambridge, Cambridge of Oxford. So he did have access to Oxford, to books that we don't have access to.
Yes.
But also it is mythopoeia, which is basically the creation of myth. And some people would say that mythopoeia is, it's artificial or lesser than and shouldn't be taken seriously compared to mythic traditions from like ancient cultures. But I would say to that because there is so much of history that has been rewritten, misconstrued, forged.
Or simply doesn't exist.
or simply doesn't exist, that mythopoeia is almost like downloading timeless reality,
Yeah.
like these thematic truths that exist,
Yeah.
and then so people like Tolkien or C.S. Lewis or Dan Simmons
Yep.
would be essentially like, it's kind of like downloading software onto your laptop to make it run better.
Yeah.
That's kind of the way I understand it.
And it ties into the ideal of just perennialism in general, right? This idea that if you take all of the world's myths and sort of try and see what through lines you can find, you do find a through line. There is an underlying truth to all of these things. And I'm curious to kind of come back really quick to the idea of Saturn and the Golden Age being turned to lead, and the sitters, as you said. What was the sort of, in this cosmology, what's the incentive for these traders? Were they offered like power or dominion over the cycle that we exist
Yeah,
in? What was their
exactly.
reason for doing? Okay.
Yeah, they were offered like dominion over the cycle, and then you could even take it a whole schizo level further and say that artificial intelligence is the demiurge.
Very Dan Simmons-esque.
Yeah, being created or remembered, and then basically artificial intelligence and transhumanism will be like the ceiling of the Kali Yuga, because there's inorganic, and like he and his archons, so these inorganic beings will basically be able to exist in the organic world, whereas prior to this, the demiurge and the archons, and what's called the archontic infection is like has just been like a mind virus that has always tried to infect man, with greed and avarice and envy
Through different mechanisms. And then
Yeah,
AI in the modern day makes that very easily accessible.
yeah. Or it no longer needs to be a mind virus. It can be a real, like its real thing
It's a real thing.
in the world, and it can
Yeah.
exist independent of man. And at that point, it is like game over.
Yes. Yeah. It kind of
Yeah,
ties into the idea I was talking about, how I was reading up a little bit on more sort of traditional Norse mythology. This idea that the forces of chaos win at the end of time before the cycle repeats, which is sort of different from, I guess you could say, the Abrahamic tradition, where the kingdom of heaven comes against the forces of hell and prevails over them, and then there is a new heaven. But it doesn't exactly speak of like a new cycle. It sort of just draws the end there.
it's the
That
end.
there's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
it's the end. There's one cycle, good prevails over evil, and then everything is okay in the end. Whereas like in the Norse
but then time
cosmology,
ends basically.
right, exactly. And does that even make sense? Because if we consider God as an eternal being, this is the thing that's never really sat right with me. And even as I've called myself a Christian, which I've gone back and forth on over the years, this idea that like, I think most Christians think a lot about heaven and like getting to heaven and then just everything being good for eternity. My thought there has always been like, do we even want that? Do we want to exist in a place where there is no, like the gods revere us because we are mortal? Is there something? Is there a beauty to actually being immortal and timeless and existing in perpetual goodness and bliss? Does that even exist without the presence of chaos or evil? And so these questions have always kind of turned me on to the idea that if God has existed from the beginning of, well, there was no beginning of time. If God has
Yeah,
existed eternally, then there is no completion to that. It is simply
no,
eternal. So to
yeah,
me, the worldview itself kind of has like some holes, I suppose. How does time end if it doesn't begin? That kind of a thing.
mm.
And so I guess that's why I'm immediately more drawn to this idea of cycles. Um, yeah.
So yeah. Well, in the Hyperborean lore or mythos, like it's very much a warrior tradition.
Mm,
So it's a purely warrior tradition in the sense that like we're in the Kali Yuga.
mhm,
We are actually the losers of the last round,
mhm. The
and
inheritors.
we're surrounded by the slaves of Atlantis, and also and I'll get to how it fits with Atlantis
Yeah, we'll
specifically.
ground that. Yeah.
Yeah, but because this is like a bit all over the place. I can understand, but it kind of needs to be explained like this because there's no clear, nobody's written a clear
Exactly.
like framework for this exactly.
Perhaps you will one day.
Maybe, yeah. If I can, if it doesn't make me go crazy, like before
Yeah.
I get there. But anyway, yeah, so it's a warrior tradition. Like essentially, like the round that we're in of Kali Yuga is drawing towards a finale, with which like the great cranking of the wheel gets turned again, and a new round gets started, and it's the job of the Virya, who are those who have been incarnated in the world, who still have the Hyperborean spirit inside of them, who haven't been like completely diminished, to sing the songs of the Minnesanga, which means blood memory in German, and the Minnesanga are actually specifically a group of troubadours that existed in the Middle Ages, but sort of archetypally to sing the song of the Minnesanga, which is like to remember the mystery of the astral light of the blood of the Golden Age, and then transmute the Kali Yuga back into the Golden Age at Ragnarok.
Because the essence exists forever.
round.
It's how the essence is sort of alchemized.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you essentially alchemically like return Saturn to his golden throne, so to speak.
It's so
as
interesting,
well.
this character that Saturn takes on, because I feel like, yeah, in the age that we live in, Saturn is like the epitomal bad guy. But he doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily need to be. He has the essence and he has the proclivity to be either or. And it's essentially how he's being manipulated.
Yeah. And so, like King Theoden is a good example in Lord of the Rings. So you have King Theoden being the divine king, not divine king, but the righteous king who became the tyrant when Wormtongue was whispering in his ear. And so again, that's a sort of mythopoetic theme as well.
There's this kind of another connection in Tolkien with the golden, I think it's the golden tree of Valinor, and Melkor, Morgoth, and Ungoliant, the spider, come to darken it and take its essence and drain it, and the light is taken away. So it's kind of Tolkien was definitely, intentionally or not, playing with something here very similar.
It does seem like he was tapped in. He was tapped
Yeah.
into it in some very deep way. So that's like the kind of the mythic story, and then more specifically, you could see you have the wars between the Tuatha Dé Danann and the Fomorians, and then obviously Ragnarok, the war between the Aesir and Loki and the children of Loki, and so Loki could mean to represent, like in Hyperborean mythos, represents these traitor Siddhas, these dark Atlanteans, this group of Hyperboreans who defected, and because what happens in the Norse myth. So Loki tricks someone into killing Balder. I can't remember who it was.
Yeah, it's I think it's his mother, because Balder and Loki, I believe, have the same mother, but like Balder was favored or something like that, and so the gods used to, Balder was like divinely protected in a sort of Achillean way where like nothing
Yeah.
could penetrate him or kill him except for one thing, which was mistletoe.
Yeah.
And so Loki acquires mistletoe secretly and says like, oh, well, there's this tradition of like throwing projectiles at Balder and seeing if they could kill him, and obviously
Yeah.
nothing can. But Loki's like, let me give it a shot. And so then he kills him with mistletoe, and everybody's
No,
like,
I think he tricks Heimdall into using
right.
the mistletoe.
Yes, exactly. He procures it, but he doesn't do it himself.
Yeah,
He's
yeah,
the
yeah,
trickster whispering in the ear to get
yeah.
to get somebody
And that,
else to do his bidding.
yeah, and that triggers Ragnarok.
Right.
And so in Hyperborea, some Hyperborean mythos, these traitor siddhas are basically like they're otherwise known as the Dark Atlanteans. But if I want to just give the context, so Atlantis was Hyperborea 2.0. It was like the second iteration. So this
Was
had
it like the
happened.
migration? So everybody,
Yeah,
like the Hyperborea was fallen, people migrated out because it was glacially frozen over. It was
yeah,
no longer livable, so they migrated, created a new civilization, which became Atlantis.
yes,
Okay.
yeah. And then the same thing happened again. Um,
And this would be the
and
deluge that, like, well, I guess we'll ground it in history later, but you continue with the myth.
yeah, but this would be the deluge of Noah, essentially. And so Atlantis, where it was, I would say most likely the Mid-Atlantic ridge that runs between in the North Atlantic Ocean. But Atlantis was an empire, so it had, people would make the argument that the Americas had a lot of Atlantean outposts, and if we're going to ground it in chronology, this is obviously nobody really knows. I am interested in the idea that it wasn't as long ago as we think it was. There is a channel on YouTube called Archaics, and he is a chronologist. He's a fascinating story, that his personal story, but he's this chronologist that has assessed like all of the ancient myths, histories, chronologies, like the calendars, whether it's the Mayan calendar or the Vedic calendar, Chinese calendars, Sumerian calendars, and he says that there's been a fatal mistake in people's interpretation of these calendars, and what we have assumed is a year is actually a day. So ancient
Wow.
calendars were day counts rather than year counts, meaning that the Kali Yuga doesn't last for 360,000 years, like they say in the Vedas, because there's such an unbelievable amount of time. And even
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
to think about the Sumerian king list, so the Sumerian kings each lived for like 10,000 years, according to Sitchin. And again, that's like nothing lives for 10,000 years. And 10,000 years, like, you can't put that into any sort of context.
Yeah. It throws everything else out of the water because, like, we were, we'll talk about the history of like the ancient North Eurasians becoming the Proto-Indo-Europeans and these sorts of things, and that's all within the last 15,000 years. So if we are grounded in that historical context, then it's like these people were living through every single one of those epochs, and that just doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah, like a single king living for almost the entire epoch. No.
Yeah.
So he posits that it's actually days. So the Kali Yuga is 360,000 days.
Okay.
What would
And
that put its end point then? If you converted that into
he says
days.
2106, if I remember correctly. Your viewers, you can go and fact check all of these things, and
It'd be like
get
1,000 years then, because like if a year or if a year is 365 days and it's 360,000 years, that's really 360,000 days would be 1,000 years, right? Do I have that right?
360,000 days in years. Let's have
Math
a
is
look.
not my strong suit.
Yeah, just shy of 1,000 years.
Yeah, so that would kind of make sense.
Yeah. So again, I'm sort of cross comparing two things that are not exactly aligned. Like Archaics doesn't have he doesn't really deal with Hyperborean mythos or anything like that, but he does deal with ancient calendars.
Yeah, universal
And
scale
yeah,
of things.
and he has he has a very like compelling. He has a lot of receipts. Like he basically he he was in jail in Texas, and he was in jail for like 25 years, I believe the story is like he went to jail when he was like 17, and then when
A
you're
lot
in
of time to
jail,
research.
yeah, when you're in jail, you end up staying in jail for much longer than your initial sentence because like jail culture,
You have to survive in there, yes.
prison culture, exactly.
Right.
Like, yeah. So anyway, he became the librarian, and in the basement of these Texas penitentiaries, there were all these boxes full of old books. So books like pre-1900 books.
That they're not expecting the inmates to read, I suppose.
No, they just put them there.
Yeah.
So this is all his source material. So he's published like all the 1,300 books that he's used to come up with his thesis. So it's
Wow.
quite compelling. And anyway, that. So yeah, let me sort of round this off so it's not too all over the place. The final mythological aspect to this primordial war that occurred that created the fall of Hyperborea was in the Mahabharata, where you had two cousin tribes, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, who went to war with each other. The Pandavas being the forces of Dharma, so they're the forces, like they represent the cosmic law and righteousness, and the Kauravas are the forces of Adharma, and they represent greed and jealousy, and they have a war with each other that is essentially mutually assured destruction. But the Pandavas defeat the Kauravas, and they have weapons spoken about in the Vedas, like the Vimanas, which are flying airships, and Brahmastras, which are like these ancient nuclear warheads, essentially. That
Very much like what we see today.
yeah, yeah, that scarred the earth, and this is where theories about the Grand Canyon come in, and the Sahara Desert as well. Previously having been a fertile land area, largely fertile.
Yeah, which would connect to the actual historical chronology, because there was like the Green Nile period, where when the Egyptians and the Nubians were like settling that valley, it was incredibly lush. Like the Nile river flooded constantly. All the land surrounding it was green and fertile, and now it's a desert.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And that's just true. That's true chronological history that they teach you in school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in this podcast, I'm not going to be able to, off the top of my head, frame the chronology properly. But people can check out my previous videos, and I will make an effort to try and frame it chronologically in a way that people can sort of
Follow along
coherent.
easily.
And find coherent. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
right now I'm just sort of laying down what the myth really is.
Sure.
But this initial war happens. Migrations come south. Migration to Eurasia. Migration to America. Atlantis is created, and then the same thing happens again. And then you have at least according to Evola, you have a migration from west to east. So this is the Atlantean migration that comes east, and this might link up with the Tour de Danann. And as they come from the Isle of Avalon, which is to the far west, to the Occident, as it's described. And then this also links with Cro-Magnon and
Neanderthals. Yeah.
So this is the final war framework that we have, which is where Cro-Magnon coming to populate Europe up until about 10,000 years ago were in constant warfare with Neanderthals.
Yeah.
And then it gets very strange when it comes to Neanderthals, because Jeffrey Epstein was obsessed with Neanderthals. In fact, in the files, there's emails where I don't know if he's doing it in jest, but he basically tells people he is a Neanderthal.
Yeah.
And he is he was obsessed with somehow reconstituting a true Neanderthal and making rediscovering the Neanderthal genome and making one. So when you start to read the Epstein files, it gets really strange, because
It is one of those things that I feel like has been one of the greatest breakthroughs of like shattering the normie mind of like all of the things that Alex Jones and other adjacent conspiracy theorists have just been saying for years, and then it just comes out that it's like all true. And if it comes out that it's all true, and we look at the things that Jeffrey Epstein is saying, and we go, oh yeah, he was just joking. He just named his bank account Ball
Mm.
as a joke, just like he
Yeah.
didn't know what he was doing. It's like,
Mm.
no, every single thing is intentional here. If every single thing that was intentionally said about it is true, every single thing that occurs within it is intentionally true, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
Even
I
if
think
it's
you're right.
not, it is, right? I mean,
Yeah,
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
from
Even
a
if it
from
sort
a
of,
what do they say? What the purpose of a system is, what it does. It's like
yes,
he's saying it as a joke. That idea is coming from somewhere that isn't joking.
yes,
Yes.
exactly.
It's
And the
still
myth becomes
manifesting.
reality. Yeah,
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, and this is seen in sort of this dichotomy between in the Vedas, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. That is also seen in Rome, where you had the Punic War. So you had the Romans fighting as Carthaginians, because the Carthaginians were just sacrificing children to Moloch, and the Romans were like this, like we're like, okay, fine, we're all a little bit crazy, but this is fucking insane, man.
this is too far. Yeah,
Yeah, this is too far. And it was true. Like the various Roman statesmen and historians have spoken about like their abject disdain for what the Carthaginians were doing. So we kind of have this like force of Dharma versus force of Adharma, like just playing out in the eternal return, like thematically, like across different scales throughout history, throughout different civilizations, within your own life, within the life of society, and you can kind of see the pattern, and you can see it
Yes.
repeating itself.
Talk a little bit about the fall of Atlantis, because Atlantis did become this civilization that was inhabited by these migrated Hyperboreans. But then there was also the deluge that is associated with, I believe, in Greek and Egyptian mythology, the idea that the Atlanteans had become corrupt due to their what's the word I'm looking for? It like comes up in every single Greek myth. It's not pride. It's
Hubris.
hubris. Yes, because of their hubris,
Yeah.
because of their belief that they were as strong or as powerful as the gods, and the gods wanted to thwart that immediately.
Yeah.
How does that appear in the tradition?
You have the traitor Siddhas or their Atlantean offspring, and again, like you can also see this in Aztec cosmology between Quetzalcoatl and Tezcatlipoca. So two brothers, one good, teaching the little people there civilization and how to build righteous systems and this kind of stuff, and then Tezcatlipoca being the one demanding human sacrifice
Yeah.
and this kind of stuff. So that in the Aztec mythology corresponds in the Hyperborean law, Atlantean Hyperborean law, with the offshoot of the traitor Siddhas and the loyal Siddhas and the traitor Siddhas both occupying the same empire in the same way we have today, like the good people and the bad people occupying the same empire,
Yep.
America or Europe or wherever.
Kind of another Mesoamerican connection with the Inca. This historically played out very, very much like this. Right before the Spaniards arrived, the empire was plunged into civil war by a brother who was good and represented their kingdom, customs, heritage, and a usurper brother who plunged the kingdom into bloodshed and dishonored their culture and ancestors. And that's when the Spanish arrived, was right in the kind of the aftermath of this bloody sundering of a good brother and a bad brother, destroying their kingdom together. So it plays out in testifiable history as well.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. I'm really glad you brought that up because South America is also full of megalithic structures that I've been to, especially in Cusco and in the surrounding areas, and they're like it's amazing. Like if you haven't been, it's extraordinary to see these things, and you're like, all right, this wasn't made by Incas. Come on, like
Yeah.
the huge granite blocks, like 30-ton blocks laid on top of each other to make giant walls with laser precision, zero mortar. Couldn't even fit a piece of paper between the grooves. At the top of mountains, in like where the source of the granite is 5 valleys away, and they're like, yeah, this was brought over on little wooden wheel systems up and down like several valleys, and it's perfectly aligned with the summit, with the solstice,
solstice.
and the sun's paths. And
Yeah.
you're like, okay. So that would be like, yeah, a Hyperborean or Atlantean peoples having migrated from Atlantis during their heyday into Central and South America to establish colonies. Tiahuanaco in Bolivia being a famous one. That's and Sir Miguel Serrano considered Tiahuanaco to have been a Hyperborean colony, and before it was destroyed. And basically, the same thing seemed to occur over and over and over again, which is where the local populations, after having being part of these Hyperborean civilizations, then get persuaded by groups within the Hyperboreans or just off their own back decide to revolt and try and kill their Hyperborean overlords, let's say, or their chieftains, which causes these people to then up and leave and migrate. And this, according to Serrano, is the story of basically the Americas, like through Central America down into South America, then over into Polynesia. They left Chile, then they left Ecuador, and went west across the Pacific to Polynesia. This is where you have Kon-Tiki being, or the Polynesian mythic stories of their gods being exactly the same as the stories of the Incas with Viracocha. And then they sort of there's connections with the Norse gods. Like there is one of the Colombian creator gods, his name is Votan. Which is just like just Wotan, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why is that?
It's quite literally the name. Yeah.
Just with a V, and it's like, why is that the name if it's all the way over there? They're just starting to be ridiculous.
Yes.
So but then Atlantis falls. But yeah, through their hubris, they have these. This is kind of this is part of the lore. It's from the internet. But they start these genetic programs, essentially. And I don't know where the name for this came from, but I've heard it called, these programs used to happen in the pits of Ashgalar. So these giant pits where they made chimeras. And
Sounds like where Saruman made his half-orc Uruk.
he's all, yeah. He's Uruk-hai. Yeah, exactly.
Whoa.
And the Atlanteans were doing this, and then this then coincides with the Book of Enoch, when they talk about the Watchers.
Yep.
The Watchers being these dark Atlanteans, these traitor faction within the Hyperborean descendants, Hyperboreans, who come into the daughters of men and create the Nephilim.
Yep.
And the Nephilim, and then in response to this creation, God, floods the earth.
Yeah, and the Nephilim too are giants, which I believe is how in the Celtic lore, the Tuatha De Danann framed the Fomorians as being giants of the land.
Yeah, and the Jotun in Norse mythology also being giants, and Loki being half Jotun, half Aesir. So
a mix,
he was the first hybrid.
Yes.
causing the downfall, causing Ragnarok to occur. So yeah, this is how the kind of lore plays out with Atlantis. Evola then said, you know, whatever you think about that mythological story, you had this migration from west to east after the fall of Atlantis,
Interesting.
with groups going to the Fertile Crescent, to the Urmian Plateau, and
Where is
the
that?
Mediterranean, and basically being the progenitors of civilizations in and around the Levant and Mesopotamia.
Okay. Fascinating. Wow. And that is exactly where those stories come out of, right? Because we learned that, like, the first time that Atlantis is mentioned in written history is from Plato via his ancestor Solon, who got it from the Egyptians. So it's all right
Yes.
around in that sort of Levantine, Eastern Mediterranean region.
Yeah, exactly. And the Sumerian story, again, has so many parallels. And
You know what else is fascinating too? I had to point out. I'm sorry, is that the haplogroup, I believe it's haplogroup X, is a haplogroup that is shared. If people don't know how haplogroups work, it's a clustering of genetic signals that are passed down from either your mother, your Y haplogroup, or your X haplogroup, or your father, your Y haplogroup. And the paternal haplogroup X that is passed down linearly by the father is present in the Near East, the Levant area, and also northwestern America in the indigenous cultures that have absolutely no connection whatsoever across the Atlantic. The haplogroup has existed since the beginning of whatever migrations would have occurred out of Africa in the traditional chronology, but they can't explain why there is a cluster of X in the eastern coast of America and in the Levant. And so it makes sense if there was a shared civilization that, was a part of America at one point and then migrated into the Levant. Somehow.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yeah. Somehow. That's really cool. I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Something to
so
look
the
into, very cool.
Hyperborean lore doesn't agree with the out of Africa theory. And if you've ever watched Robert Sepper,
Yeah.
he does pretty cool work. Like he's done well to lay out a counter to the traditional out of Africa theory.
He does well, especially in explaining, like we are probably going to get into in a second, about the sort of Cro-Magnon and Neanderthal mixture, as opposed to you would have like Homo sapien and Denisovan admixture towards the east in like Asia, and then Homo sapien and Homo. I forget the one that he says is the more of like the African admixture, the one that you see most
Homo
typically.
erectus
Erectus, yeah, and
or
this would make
Australopithecus.
it's one or the other, and it makes sense from a perspective of like the traditional out of Africa theory is that we were all exactly the same when we were in East Africa, and then some migrated out, and then within 60,000 years we all developed these like distinctly different traits. Of course, like the genetics is like, oh, it's all 99.9% similar. It's like, but that 0.1% difference has bred phenotypically and genotypically incredibly different human beings to the point where it's like, the blood type is different. You can't get bone marrow transplants from in between races. You can't do certain organ transplants between because they're just like incompatible to a degree. And if you are to take the theory that it's just environmental adaptation over time that breeds these things, it doesn't really make sense why the mutations in the blood would not account for the ability to cross hybridize during surgery or something like that. But if it's an entirely different I'm hesitant to say the word species because that just sounds so eugenicist and so racist and all these things. But we do know that humans have some Neanderthal DNA, and the Neanderthal DNA that is within humans can only be passed down from the mother, because male Homo sapien and female Neanderthal cannot interbreed, but the other way around they can. And so when you start to see these things play out on one level, it's like, so then it's possible on multiple levels, and it's Occam's razor. It just explains things a lot better and a lot more cleanly than the idea of just gene mutation over time breeding vast differences simply because of the environment. And just to add another thing to that, the environment itself changes over time. The environment in Scandinavia 10,000 years ago is not nearly the environment of Scandinavia today. The same with sub-Saharan Africa, the Levant, all of these places were vastly different. So how would they have adapted to the climates of the modern day throughout the last 50,000 years? It's just it just doesn't align.
And then there's the difference between the uniformitarian viewpoint that the environment changes gradually and slowly, and the opposing viewpoint, which is that no change. There's been periods in history where change has happened like this.
Yeah, within years.
Like literally flash freezing of certain areas of the world, or like aridification, like that's occurred over like a period of a month.
Right.
And so there's so much we don't really know, and obviously we want to be healthily skeptical rather than epistemically arrogant, which unfortunately is like how so many of like the boomer generation of scientists basically like they just became extremely epistemically arrogant because it was a systemic sort of situation.
It's easier too, isn't it? It's easier to explain to people. Well, it's like, well, it's just the way that it is. Don't question it. This seems to make the most base sense. As long as you don't look too deeply, it makes sense. It's the second that you start to look more deeply, like one thing, like we talked about the interbreeding with Neanderthals and whatnot. There's this propensity for some populations, like the Basque and some people in Morocco, that have like the Rh negative blood. And people look at the one thing that's immediately the most fascinating about the Basque is that they have an entirely they have the same paternal haplogroups as the rest of the Indo-European peoples, but they don't speak the same language. They have a language and a culture that's endured for centuries, and people argue that it's geographic as well. But also, they have Rh negative blood, which is unlike any other Indo-European peoples. So it's like, what's the connection? Where does that come from?
Not quite. The British Isles also has a larger proportion of Rh.
Oh, is that right? Okay, interesting. Is it just because they have the highest percentage?
Basque has the most concentrated, but the British Isles and Scandinavia also have. So Ireland, England, Norway, and Sweden. Central Europe also, but it starts to get less and less. And by the time you get into the Mediterranean and further east, Rh negative is very, very small. The difference being 15%, I believe, or 17% in the British Isles, down to like 2% by the time you get to Greece.
Okay, that clears things up. But so is this an idea that it comes from like Neanderthals who would have existed more like in Western Europe?
No, the opposite. So Rh negative comes from Cro-Magnon.
Okay, I see.
Or like, in mythical terms like Atlantean or Hyperborea or something like that.
Okay.
Because then you also have across the western seaboard of like the Mediterranean and then North Africa, you have the Amazigh people in West Africa, like the Berber Amazigh people.
Yeah.
They have an outlying degree of Rh negative blood. And then finally the Fulani people, which are like a nomadic tribe in West Sub-Saharan West Africa, are but they belong, they're not like the rest of the Nigerian African population. They're very distinct, but they also have a slight spike, 6% or something on average of Rh negative blood, whereas the rest is like barely 1%.
Interesting.
So you do have these weird areas along the western seaboard, which might suggest, and the folks of the Canary Islands, the Guanche.
I'd be curious I don't even know if there are any more like indigenous peoples of the Azores Islands, but I know that the Azores are like, widely considered to be one of the last vestiges of like a mountain range that would have existed on Atlantis because it's so deep into the Atlantic Ridge.
Yeah, and the Guanche of the Canary Islands, which is very close to the Azores, they're like white, blonde-haired, and like rosy, ruddy sort of features. You look like me. Like it's really like that's the way they were described. Like, it's very, very strange.
So fascinating. Yeah, I made a video recently where I was talking about the Amazigh people, and talking about, because I made a video on the Reconquista recently, and I was talking about how like a lot of the tribes that came into Iberia, 90% of the armies were Berber, while the only like the 10% ruling class were Arab. And there's this huge confusion today because North Africa is entirely Islamicized over whether or not these people are like Arab to any degree. And as you know, with like, ruling classes, it's the same reason why the inhabitants of Turkey today are like ancient Anatolians genetically, but they speak a Turkic language and they're, Muslim. Because of that, those are the ruling classes that exist, but there's a lot of like ethnic homogeneity there. And those things are so interesting because it's like a time capsule. You're looking back in time, seeing what populations existed there for so long. And it kind of reminds me too of like, you mentioned in your video on what is Hyperborea, this connection to the actual, I can't remember if it was the Hyperboreans themselves or the Atlanteans being the ancient North Eurasian populations that would have mixed with the Cro-Magnon Western hunter-gatherers.
Yeah, that was Hyperborean. So in the first wave of migration from north to south, yes, you had the ancient North Eurasians. As Evola described the ancient North Eurasians as being most likely like quite direct descendants of these Hyperboreans. So that's sort of Eastern Eurasia, Western Eurasia, but like east of Europe.
Like Siberian sort of territory.
Yeah,
right.
yeah, like the mammoth hunters. And yeah, one other very interesting thing that I could explain is the concept of squatter man. Are you familiar with this?
I don't think so.
So squatter man is a relic, image that is found all over the world in various different cultures, particularly in the north. There were lots in France and in North America, in Eurasia, Siberia, all the way into the east. And it looks like a bloke with his arms up like this and his legs doing the same.
I just looked up
It's
the picture.
it's the figure of the Amazigh flag.
Yes, and it is the figure of the Amazigh flag, exactly, which is super strange. And squatter man is found in petroglyphs in Peru, like huge petroglyphs on the ground, cave paintings all over the place, and it's one of the most universal symbols of like ancient prehistory.
Yeah.
Weirdly, in the Amazigh flag, and they used to tattoo it here onto their chin.
Yeah, okay, I think I've seen that.
And what squatter man has been theorized to be is some sort of sign in the sky that was observed by people, particularly those in caves, because they were drawn in caves. So it was something they saw in the sky and then drew. And in the electric universe theory, which is kind of this idea that the planets, the celestial bodies, emit plasma, like plasmation sort of emission, and it interacts with the different planets. And so under the electric universe theory, it's been proposed that the world was at some point in time was in a polar orientation, locked in the gravitational polar orientation to Saturn. And at this time you had Saturn, Venus, and Mars all in a line in an orientation to the North Pole. And so this, like you could corroborate as okay, this is the golden age maybe. And so Saturn was like large in the sky and it acted as like a sun. And in fact, in the ancient world, the sun was further away. Okay, I'm just explaining this.
I'm just thinking the chronology through. Yes,
I can't corroborate this with astrophysics. So I'm not
okay.
like postulating that this is true. It's just interesting. And then it's like something, the fall of Hyperborea was a kind of cosmic war, and this is how Sarana describes it, like a war in the sky, and this is how it's described in the Vedas with the Vimanas and these like giant weapons and stuff. And it was something to also do with this polar orientation of these planets, and how as the sun came into a closer orbit with the Earth, the plasma of the sun interacted with the plasma of Saturn, flinging Saturn out into its current position, and causing like the interaction between Saturn, Venus, and Mars to like rain down plasma rockets onto Earth. And in the sky, as a result, they saw this plasmation of Squatterman, and that was like seeing the Death Eaters put the what you call it, the dark mark in the sky. It was like a sort of symbol of the end of the world.
Wow.
And they will retreat. People who survived retreated into caves, and they every time they would go outside, they would look up and they would see
that, and they would draw it. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's so fascinating.
Really wild.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what was going through my head while you were telling me that, the calculations I was trying to draw, was this 360,000 day cycle, and whether or not this would be like the beginning or the end of a cycle, because I'm trying to think. Obviously, this is something that like we can't say for sure. We can't like throw the chronologies together immediately based off of everything that we have at hand. Maybe Archaics can. We'll have to look into that. But if this 360,000 day cycle began, this would have been like we're in the age of the Kali Yuga now. What in this cosmology is the sort of proposed beginning of the Kali Yuga? Was it the deluge of Atlantis? Was it the war between the Hyperborean? Like what is that?
Yeah. So, well, you could line it up to the Younger Dryas, which would be
Okay.
9,000
Right.
years ago.
Yeah.
It was in 9,000 BC.
I think it was 9,000 BC, and it's 11,000 years ago.
Right. Okay. So you could line it up with the Younger Dryas, and or you could line it up with the, like in Jewish mysticism, they believe that the world is like 6,000 years old,
Right.
and and like in their eschatology, it's going to end anytime now.
Any day. Yeah.
Any day, yeah. And when I say end, it's like it ends and restarts. So yeah, so we could say 6,000, roughly 6,000 years ago. Let me have a quick look. It might take me too long to find this, but I hesitate to throw out dates.
No worries. If you need to take a second to find something, we can always edit too. So
Okay.
if you
Okay.
did want to find something really quick.
Just going to plug my laptop in and go take a piss
Yep.
really quickly.
Yeah, let's do that.
also
Let's
use
take a quick
bathroom break.
Okay, perfect.
Okay. And to get myself a nice glass of milk.
Nice. I'm
Exactly.
drinking a little milk and espresso myself right now.
Yes, excellent.
Yes.
Fucking Matita Valhumra.
That's a fascinating story, man. This has all just been so good. It's like it like feels good to connect dots, doesn't it? This is what excites me the most about myth, is like when you actually put pieces together that you see in reality but are just seemingly random occurrences that occur throughout history, and then it's like, oh, the stories just seem to fit neatly onto it. And it's like because the history is fitting onto the story, not the other way around.
And I think it's very playful. Like, people naturally find uncertainty stressful, so they don't like to dabble in it. But I think that's a huge problem. Like you're so easily misled, and like you'll just believe in lies if you can't deal with uncertainty. And
Oh yeah, I pulled up a quote for one of my most recent videos here. What was it? Michel de Montaigne, nothing is so firmly believed as what we least know. You know, so something that we know the least about. We don't look into it, because when you look into the depth and the nuance of an idea, you start to become uncertain about it. It's the Dunning-Kruger effect. The more you know, the more you realize that you don't know. So if you live in this blissful state where it's just like, give me the cosmology, give me the morality, give me the ethics, just tell me what to do and I'll be fine. You get the answer. You can hold on to that firmly because there's nothing to contradict it. You just exist in a bubble, so to speak. But
Yeah.
the second that you venture out, now you have uncertainty. Now it's dangerous. You realize everything you firmly held is now like unbelievable, and then you can become lost. And obviously, the downstream effect is either enlightenment or spiritual psychosis, or a healthy mixture of both. But we're trying to toe that line as best as we can here.
I'm going to just share this with you quickly.
Perfect.
1 second. Yeah, so I don't know if you can see this, but it's a picture of Donald Duck and Mickey Mouse.
I've seen that. I think the first time I saw this, I was pretty young, but it stuck with me. I get
Donald
that
Duck says,
mimetic.
everything that we know and love is reducible to absurd acts of chemicals, and there is therefore no intrinsic value in this material universe. And then Mickey says, hypocrite that you are, for you trust the chemicals in your brain to tell you that they are chemicals. All knowledge is ultimately based on that which we cannot prove. Will you fight, or will you perish like a dog?
You know, kind of a random connection with Donald Duck, because earlier, Jonah, when we were talking about kind of with the Abrahamic view that good, Armageddon happens, heaven defeats hell, and then it's kind of paradise forever, a new heaven. Yeah. And you kind of brought up the question of, would we even want that? There's a Donald Duck Christmas special, and it's kind of like a whole Groundhog Day. You know, his nephews, like I think it's like Huey, Dewey, and Louie.
Yeah.
And they wish that it would be Christmas every day, and then it's Christmas every day. And at first it's like, it's awesome, they get to open their presents every day and they get to play in the snow and they love it. But then after days and days and days of Christmas, they're like, okay, now I hate Christmas. How do we stop Christmas from happening anymore? Kind of like that eternal bliss gone sour. Not saying that it's necessarily would be the case with heaven, right? But it's just an interesting connection there.
I like it.
Yeah, the only way that I could ever see the actual like heaven, eternal paradise thing playing out is just if you were completely robbed of your consciousness. You know, you're given a new light body, you become like a god, and that you don't, I don't know, desire the things that life and mortality has to offer. Like the idea of being towards death is what gives life its meaning. So perhaps if you don't have a being towards death, but you also don't have a life, then that's okay. But then you're an entirely different thing, an incomprehensible thing. I think that you'd have to just chalk it up to that if that's your worldview.
And that's what they say about people who've achieved some sort of spiritual enlightenment, is they often become extremely apathetic.
Yeah.
And then they have to rediscover their motivation. Or they don't, and many gurus, like many gurus are just, or people who are particularly wise, like have big problems. Like Alan Watts, for example, like he drank himself to death, and so I think I'm kind of rambling about that, but
that's okay.
Yeah, in terms of the warrior's path, I think is the most noble one. And this is why I'm drawn to the Hyperborean mythos, because, for everything that it is, like it could just be like fantasy, but it at least has a very deep framework that seems to have been replicated by the greatest authors of the world in their own ways, in such a manner that like embodying or doing your own mythopoeia or mythopoesis with things, I think is very It's well worth it. It like helps you orient your life. I'm very into Norse mythology and the idea of the web of weird and the Norns and how we have our fate kind of decide, like our death day is decided, that is created the moment we're born. But every second along the way until we die is like our dharma, our raging attempt to have the Norns weave the intermediate threads between those 2 points in a way that is heroic.
Yeah, favorable to us because like it's I always sort of I think it's something akin to like climbing a mountain. You know that you're going to reach the top of the mountain. There's only one peak, but there are a million different routes up the mountain. And so you must begin your descent and you must reach the peak. Other than that, it's up to you. You know, and are you going to take a heroic route up the mountain, or are you going to take an escalator to the top? What's it going to be? That's
No
kind of how I think
gondolas.
of it. No gondolas. Yeah, get off the gondola, you freaking gondola riders. Get off the gondola,
Yeah.
get on the tiger.
Yeah, we're not gondola back here.
Speaking of riding tigers, Julius Evola. He has this quote that you put into your video. Sorry, my phone is going crazy right now. I thought it was so fascinating. Because there is this distinction to be made. From my understanding, Rene Guénon had a more sort of spiritual perspective of the Hyperborean myth, whereas perhaps like the ancient Greeks would have had a more realistic physical place. Kind of very much like in the same way that like Jesus speaks of the kingdom of heaven. The kingdom of heaven is a place. It's within you. It's in your midst. It's all these different things, right? So what really is it? And I think with Hyperborea, you can kind of get into the same issue. But this quote by Evola, who believes that it is spiritual and physical at the same time, if I'm correct, he says, the Kali Yuga must be defeated inside you. The Golden Age will first return in your soul. This mystery is unknown to the age of the Kali Yuga because it is beyond the comprehension of animal men. And you had that in your video, and I thought it was so fascinating and kind of made me wonder, like, is the return of the Golden Age, the alchemizing of Saturn from lead back into gold, is that ultimately up to us as people to reach a certain state of a sort of enlightenment within our own souls where we have the power to bring this about?
Yeah, so this is the myth of the Holy Grail, of the Grail
Beautiful.
legend, or Parseval. Yeah, so it is I believe actually you said that was an Evola quote, but actually I think that's a Miguel Serrano quote.
Thank you. I might have mistaken that.
I may have misquoted him on the video, but
Good to know,
yeah.
though.
So it's a self transmutation. So essentially, there's also a fascinating epithet, which is by a guy called John Lamb Lash, who is a comparative mythologist, also like amazing mythologist and mystic. And he says the entire Kalpa turns on one soul at a time, which is, so the Kalpa is, in-breath and out-breath of Brahma in Vedic cosmology. So with like one entire creation, one round, let's say. So it turns on one soul at a time. So the implicate and the extricate are the same. So when one, and this is what Jung, because Jung and Serrano were good friends, and so Jung would talk about the individuation and the recovering of the self, which is basically the higher self. And so in doing that, the fate of the entire Kalpa can rest on a single man. It's basically saying that each person, if we want to transmute the Kali Yuga back into the Golden Age, you first have to do it within yourself through the process of individuation, according to Jung, or recovering the blood memory, according to Serrano. it gets extremely esoteric. Like the more you read into this, and it gets into stuff like fusing your astral body with your physical body through this process and that kind of stuff, and you become the Sonnenmensch, which is the Sun Man.
The solar man.
The solar man. Or Steiner called it the spirit man. And Steiner had very, very interesting way of thinking about it, which was to do with thinking, and he put a lot of emphasis on correct thinking as the method through which man can like ascend into Sonnenmensch, or spirit man. And obviously Nietzsche calls it the Übermensch, and he talks about will being primary. And again, and then the Übermensch is he talks about overcoming man. But I think maybe that's a misunderstanding, and it's not overcoming man, because that can lead into the idea of transhumanism as being the goal of creating the Übermensch, where you do it through overcoming man, overcoming the biology of man.
I'm currently writing a big essay about this. I've released 2 parts of it, but I'm trying to figure out how the 3rd and 4th go, because I've been receiving a lot of backlash. People seem to be misunderstanding my interpretation of left and right transhumanism versus anarcho-primitivism and that sort of thing. It is a sensitive subject.
Yeah. It is. And like I personally take the opinion that transhumanism is the wrong way to go down, and it's evil. It's actually a trick.
Yeah.
And the Hyperborean law would be transhumanism would be the eternal imprisoning of the Hyperborean spirit.
Yeah, it's the inorganic that the Hyperborean organic is against.
And so Steiner talked about spirit thinking, which is basically appropriately thinking about reality in such a way to come to understand it fully. And he has the depth of Steiner is unbelievable. It's remarkable, because he lays out like the 4 realms of man, which is the spirit, the astral, the ether, and the physical. And this lays on to the 4 kingdoms of nature, where you have mineral, plant, animal, and man as well. I'm not going to riff on it too much because it's been a while since I've looked into it. But if people are interested, they can look at the book Perceiving Higher Worlds by Rudolf Steiner. So he emphasizes thinking. Nietzsche emphasizes will. Serrano emphasizes kind of memory, I suppose.
Okay.
So everyone has their different ways, but in essence, it's the transmutation of the self into the selfs. Which is like bringing the selfs, your higher self, which is the self that exists outside of time and space.
Yeah.
And fusing that in some way to your consciousness, and in doing so, when enough people do that, the world will the cataclysm will be averted, and the transmutation of Kali Yuga into Satya Yuga will be achieved.
Fascinating. I want to. It's a slight pivot, but it is still akin to what we're talking about. This idea of achieving your highest self, and you've done a lot of work recently in the realm of physics. Some might call it alchemy, of bringing in the unseen things that are still tangible physically, like energy, electricity, bioenergetic, or magnetic fields, these sorts of things that play a role in our everyday life, but we can't see them. And one of the things that I think is so fascinating about what you've done is you've created these pendants, Aquari, and people, first of all, are fascinated with them because they're beautiful. I've never gotten more compliments on a piece of jewelry in my life.
They are so eye-catching, but they're not. Yeah. It's not like a big wrapper chain, where it's like bling to the max, but it's like this nice, beautiful thing. And yeah, people do come up all the time and ask, "What is that stone?
Yeah.
Where did you get that?" So on and so
And
forth.
I'll let you explain how it works. But I do want to preference that whenever people ask me how something like bioenergetics or like the auric field or something like that works, I have been using what you've said in one video where you were like, "Well, what is Wi-Fi? How does Wi-Fi work?" And that usually stumps people right in their tracks, and they go, "Fuck, I don't know." So go ahead and tell us how does this sort of tie into, because like you said, we talked about like the etheric field and the spiritual, the astral. These are all sort of like emanations from the inner. So how does that work?
Well, I could tie it into Hyperborean mythos as well, because
I think you shall.
the original Hyperboreans were considered to be like somewhat more etheric than we are. Aberys, the Hyperborean, who is mentioned by Herodotus as being coming from Hyperborea, and he would come down into Greece and teach his ways, and he was both a healer and a poet, and he traveled on a golden arrow where he could basically, I don't know, fly. That's the way Herodotus describes it.
Probably a spaceship, but okay.
Yeah. So,
Golden
Yeah.
arrow, sure. Golden spaceship.
and he's like a compatriot of Pythagoras as well, and he deals with the healing of the soul as well as the physical body through incantation, so through sound, so specific words, basically through frequency.
Which
Is
have,
what
I was
that-
going to say, a
is what
frequency
that
or an
is.
energetic field themselves. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So everything in the world has a resonant frequency, a different resonance. Physical matter is just a slowed down resonant frequency of more energy, or like higher resonant energy. For example, in music, you have like the note C, and then C taken to the 450th octave becomes the color red.
Wow. Yeah.
So that's like an example. So when you listen to the note C, if you
You're hearing
raise
the color
that,
red.
I believe it's 440 octaves.
Yeah.
It like becomes the visible color red.
See, and this is immediately understandable for people because, like, we all color coded our subject books in school because we knew that the colors corresponded to a certain subject, or a certain day of the week, or like,
True, yeah.
Yeah. You always, you're like, yeah, 2 has blue energy or something like that, and it's because they actually do correspond to those frequencies.
Yeah. And so it gets very deep, and it's like, I would say it's the most ancient form of science, and in the ancient world they understood it in a far more acute sense than we do today. And there are like certain temples in India where if you play like a card, Viranasu or something like that, if you play a certain frequency in particular places in the temple, it triggers sort of certain things to happen with the stuff on the wall. Like I don't want to make things up, but people can go look it up and find out what I'm talking about. But how it works with the physical body is frequency is like physical ailments, whilst being caused a lot by toxicity. They're also caused by your energetic state, like the frequency that your body, that your brain, your heart, and your gut are resonating at, and it affects how open the channels in your cells are between the cell membrane to allow negative ions in, which help the cell to function properly, help the mitochondria to function. And throughout the early 20th century, there were a lot of inventors who were working specifically with frequencies, like Tesla and Wilhelm Reich. and Rife, and he had like created the Rife machine. Schauberger. Then in the Soviet Union, they were far more interested in frequency science. They created the GDV camera, the gas discharge visualization camera, which is basically able to see the energetic imprint or the light body of certain plants and humans. So you kind of see the aura. And there was the famous phantom leaf experiment, which showed using this camera, we could pick up on the electricity, the bioelectricity of a leaf.
Yeah.
And they would snip the top of the leaf, and you could still see the imprint of the leaf, of the electric imprint of the leaf.
You could see its form.
Yeah.
Even though the material had been separated. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a few scientists. Michael Levin is one. Otto Becker is another. There was a guy who worked for. I'm going to do a video on him. I can't remember his goddamn name now. But he worked for Bayer, I believe, before he got fired, and he managed to create using electromagnetic stimulation. He managed to return certain species of plants and animals back to their primordial species. So he would be able to change trout and make them their primordial version, what he considered the primordial vertion.
The ideal form of a trout.
Yeah, exactly. Again, his name. It'd probably be helpful if I got his name for your guys. So we could cut this bit out while I look for that.
No worries. Also, just really quickly, do you have a hard out or a time limit that you need to be out by?
Yeah, it's 9:15 now, and I haven't had dinner. So
okay, gotcha. I don't want to keep you too long. We do just have a short Q&A from the audience. So once we wrap up this quick segment about what the pendants are, we'll do a quick Q&A and then get you out.
So I can say with the pendants, electromagnetism plays a vital role in the regeneration process, cellular regeneration. And the aura is the energy body that surrounds the human body, and it goes roughly 3 to 5 feet out. This is what can be picked up by gas discharge visualization. This is associated with your cell's ability to regenerate. Death is known as a flat line on a cardiogram. So you're out of electricity. That's what death means.
Yeah.
So the whole body runs on bioelectricity and electromagnetism. What the pendants do, we created a very specific process that is part frequency engineering. We have a mineral composite, which goes through a 28-day process where it's charged using arbitrary waveform generators, which is like a machine that's usually used to tune electronics and stuff like that. We charge this mineral, and it's taken through the 7 stages of alchemy. So it gets broken down and reformed. It gets dissolved in water, and then it gets reformed over time as the water evaporates. And it happens again and again and again as it's being charged. And this gives the mineral its own biofield in the same way that the human body has its own biofield.
Right.
And it operates as a form of scalar waves, which are longitudinal waves as opposed to transverse waves. So electromagnetism is transverse. These waves dissipate over time, whereas scalar waves, which is what Tesla theorized about and confirmed, they're more permanent. Human consciousness operates on scalar waves, for example.
Interesting.
And it operates through the morphic field. So if people are interested, they can look into the work of Rupert Sheldrake, where he talks about morphic fields. The world is basically precipitated in these morphic fields, which are energetic Fields similar to the forms that Plato talked about.
Yeah.
And in this way, then these forms are connected through one continuous field. So it's fields within fields. So you have a morphic field, your family has a morphic field, traffic lights in your town have a morphic field. Everything that operates on a pattern has a morphic field, but these patterns can be changed over time.
Programmed, sort of.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So we program the mineral with certain frequencies based on the Nogier frequencies. He was a French scientist who discovered which frequencies correspond to which organs in the body, which run along meridian channels. Everything within the body is connected. The materialist physicalism that we associate health with is kind of a 20th century misnomer and misconception.
Yeah.
In my opinion. And so the pendants, what they do is they radiate these fields into your body, into the cells of your body. And we got it tested in a lab in Germany. And we demonstrated that it increases your cellular vitality and your mitochondria by 36%. And it decreases oxidative stress by 60%. And so oxidative stress is basically caused by everything in the modern world.
Just environmental factors.
Exactly. And oxidative stress, if stronger or more intense than your cell's ability to regenerate, will cause your cells to start malfunctioning.
Thus, you get chronic illnesses and autoimmune issues and things like that.
Yeah, precisely. So on the physiological level, the pendants are like a vitality booster, and you can just wear them. But on the more like mystic, spiritual side of things, each frequency is also associated with certain emotions or certain purposes. Like Ajna is coded to the pineal gland. Avalon is associated with childhood trauma and processing childhood trauma and connecting with like the ancestral line as well. It's the most Hyperborean. I
was gonna say this is something that like I might need to pick one of those up as well, because I've really been enjoying this one. Like we've talked about how like I put it on a little over a year ago and I haven't parted with it since. Like I don't even take it off to go in the ocean, silly enough, because that was how I lost my first one not too long ago. The Atlantic Ocean heartlessly stole it from me.
To redistribute it to someone else.
Exactly, somebody else will. There is somebody in greater need underground.
We'll pick it up.
Yeah, no, but I've spoken about this on the podcast. I won't ramble too long, but I did go through a period of intense chronic pain that was brought about through harbored emotions and traumas picked up throughout my life that had just accumulated and been stored in the background. That I never addressed because I didn't know that they existed. And so then once I was forced to face it in the physical plane, I then had to attack it through the spiritual plane. And that's when I finally resolved my issues. They came on, I had them for 9 months, I couldn't figure them out. And then within 6 weeks of psychosomatic tracking and doing the emotional work, and I think that something about that has just resonated with me in the way that I've understood how not only interconnected the brain and body are, but just like, because like what even are emotions? They're chemical firings, they're these immaterial, etheric things that just exist in passing, but they inhabit literally your physical form. And so when I heard about your product, I immediately recognized that I was like, I know exactly what this is without even knowing what the science behind it is. So I'm going to have to look into the Avalon. That is something I'm very fascinated by.
Avalon's really good. It's a you work with it basically. It's not just a sudden boost. It's more like it basically helps you address the things that are deeper in your subconscious that you're not really aware of.
Which is difficult. It is insanely difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Luminous is this one, which is like
Beautiful.
dark with gold flecks, and that is the most protective. So I would suggest those who find themselves either like they have a difficult time in crowds, or they can't help but take on the emotions of other people.
Very like empathetic types.
Yeah, it's a very good one for that. Also, if, and this gets even like into the spiritual side of things, if you feel like you get attacked on like a spiritual level, like you emotionally just can't, like you have sort of depression, for example, it can help with that if the depression is not coming from purely like biochemical place, but from a more spiritual place.
Yeah.
We make the luminous with we got a piece of cloth from a Tibetan monk from his shroud, which he wore anytime he would walk through the graveyards doing his graveyard duty, and it was a protective cloth, and we got a piece of that, which is like in a vial in an alcoholic like ethanol solution, and that then comes into contact with the mineral as it's being dissolved and remade and dissolved and remade through this alchemical process. And then Libertas is the red one, which Dane has, and that's
Show it off, dude. There you go.
yeah.
I realize I put on my necklace backwards this morning in my haste to hop on the cast, but yes, it is.
And that one's to do with basically helping your true self emerge, like the part of you that wants to not be cowed by the programming of your family, society, the expectations of others.
It's an agency device.
It's an agency device. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Wow.
That's why I went for it, because especially out in public, I tend to be more shy, more fly on the wall type thing, or just, conform to what people say in pleasant conversation. But I'm at my best when I'm expressing my true self and playing into my own unique strengths. So that is why I went for the red.
Yeah, and I don't wanna hype you up too much, Dane, because you don't deserve. No, I'm just kidding. But I feel like genuinely, we were looking at videos on the last podcast where we were going through and just seeing like what's changed, and like your confidence and your ability to speak and convey your ideas with a sense of like real authority has genuinely like improved tenfold. And you even pointed that out yourself.
Yeah,
so I think that really speaks to it.
Yeah, watching the kind of the trepidation and roboticness of how I used to speak. And obviously there wasn't a point where I went, oh, now I'm speaking
now it's working
suddenly.
Yeah.
But yes, you just see looking back how much you've changed.
Yeah.
Question for you guys. Do you guys sleep with your pendants?
I do.
I don't sleep with Ajna because I find it too stimulating. But other people don't. Other people find it fine. Again, like a lot of this is this is the realm of science that is not constituted as mainstream or strict. So there's lots of ways that you can just play around with it. A good thing to do is always, at least when you wear it, because some people don't wear it all the time, but when they do, they like to sort of be intentional about it. So they're like, okay, like I'm going to tune into what the purpose of this is, and help that. Like the ajna is the pineal gland, so it's intuition and awareness and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So,
interesting. Yeah. You know what it kind of reminds me of is like the observer effect when it comes to like wave particles or the double slit experiment. It's like if you don't know that you're wearing the thing, then perhaps the experienced effect is different than when it's consciously worn, because you're experiencing the actual effect of it in a more visceral way, I guess.
Yeah, I think intention in your observation is the key, basically, with life in general. Like the more intention
presence.
you can put, the more presence and intention you can put into anything, like the ripple-on effects are bigger. I was asked the question of, sorry, I'm speaking for so long, I'm a little bit tired.
We start to get to that point.
Yeah.
It's time to go into questions soon, but as you were saying.
Yeah. Making a ritual with the most mundane things in your life is like one of the best things that you can do. So ritualizing making a cup of tea or coffee, where you basically like you kind of think about slowing down time when you're doing this process, since you make this like energetic container, this subtle container. And the more you do that, the more that slows your brain waves, and then that affects your nervous system in a positive way, puts you in a parasympathetic state. And that's like the future of health in general, like how we approach the world in a way that can benefit our nervous system, which then has these more like quantum effects in life in general.
Yeah. We could have an entire part 2 podcast in the future where we talk about just the nervous system. So perhaps we will. What were you going to say, Dane?
Just one last little anecdote related to this. I once read a theory a few years ago about Germanic and Celtic chiefs and warriors and all these things where they were particularly obsessed with jewelry, rings, torques, that kind of thing. And obviously there's the status symbol of wealth and all of that. But it was also, he was kind of theorizing that there was some kind of energetic resonance that almost helped the warrior or the chief maintain better health and vitality, and helped them with their task of being a war chief in a difficult time. So this was years before I obviously discovered the pendant, but yes, there's perhaps stretching back into even the Dark Ages, ancient period, all these things. People might have intuitively known this is good to have on my body, even if they couldn't say.
Yeah. We had Odin's ring.
Sorry?
Odin's ring, Draupnir, which was in Norse mythology, is forged by the dwarves for him, and came to symbolize like cosmic abundance for him. So I mean, it's like it's built into our ancestral like ways massively.
Yeah. Yeah, even like, in the realm of Christianity, Catholicism, like they will bless rosaries with blessed oils and holy water and that sort of thing. Even the fact that water can be holy, it just shows that like, you can carry those spiritual things into an organic wearable like jewelry or clothing or something like that. And that's why people feel like they have like a lucky shirt or like a hat, whatever.
Yeah.
These things can be imbued with energy. And you've literally done that through a physical alchemical process into these pendants. So, very cool. Well, you guys ready to jump into some questions from the audience?
Let's do it.
Yes, sir.
Okay, beautiful. Let's see. This first question comes from Zuriel G. Torres. He says, how can the modern Samwise fight the child-eating elites without turning into Saruman?
Like the Lord of the Rings allegory.
Yeah, and it came up a lot, and there's always a question that's very particular to what we were talking about. So I had to start with that one.
The modern Samwise do that.
I mean, I guess I get what he's saying. I think
how do you stare into the abyss without becoming
the better like comparison of how do I be the Gandalf, not the Saruman, because Saruman is basically a Gandalf who is evil. Samwise connection's a little more tenuous. Samwise is so good-hearted that even the ring can't really tempt him because he just likes to guard it. He is pure of heart to the core. But I do get how do you confront evil without becoming evil yourself. That is.
You need to maintain a level of awe, essentially.
whimsy?
Yeah, like you need to have awe in the world. Like you need to like try and embody the state of awe where you are able to go. I think going into the natural world is massive. Like you go into nature, and you just you just take time to look around you and be in awe of the beauty of the natural world. I think that's very helpful. And then, yeah, childlike innocence, maintaining that, not taking yourself too seriously, knowing that like as a matter of being born, you have to learn like the hardest things in the world, which is like how to move your body and how to regulate your emotions, your thoughts. And if you've already done that, then like you can, like the darkness can't really consume you. And so, and I guess I would finally say like the idea that you have a quest and a purpose, and there is no like yes, there's chaos, but there aren't accidents in terms of like your life when facing the suffering and the discontent in your personal life. It's about seeing it with reverence and knowing that there's a purpose to it, and it's your job to basically weave your fate, and the things that you do in this life are there for this life, but also for your next one, or for your higher state, for your selbst. And Nietzsche said like reason gives catharsis, meaning like there's if you can work out the reasons for your suffering, and not become Sauron, but remain childlike in your wonder of it, then that has again these ripple-on effects.
Yeah, and Nietzsche even speaks of becoming the child too, right? If you were going from camel, lion, child, like that's the ultimate, the meta is to become childlike.
Heaven, what is it? Heaven is the gates of heaven only open for those who have become like a child.
Yes, exactly. Yep.
But then at the same time, making sure you keep on top of your responsibilities as a warrior at the same time.
Exactly. Being a warrior with a childlike awe and reverence for reality.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. This next question comes from Winston, the poet and author himself. He says, I'm curious what piece of literature Orpheus would attribute to his beliefs, passions, and goals. What did you read that made you feel understood, that you had gained the courage to speak about these things?
Books are a funny thing. I think books find you. So
Agreed.
I never really went in search of certain books, and I'm not actually a prolific reader, to be honest.
You just intuit these things.
Yeah, a lot of it is intuited, and then I will read something will find me, and it will just reconfirm what I've been intuitively thinking.
Yeah.
But in terms of particularly the Hyperborean stuff, the one book called Norse, The Resurrection by Miguel Serrano, which is a fairly impregnable book. Like you have to read it several times in order to truly understand, because it's highly mystical. But it lays out the Hyperborean lore. Miguel Serrano is a dicey figure. People will find out why if they research him. But he was I found him incredibly impressive. His friends, he was friends with Carl Jung. He was friends with the Dalai Lama. He was obviously an incredibly enigmatic individual, and it comes across, especially in his book Gnostic, The Resurrection. Other than that, on certain Gnostic elements, if they want to really get the best understanding of that, I would say it's a book called Not in His Image by John Lamb Lash, which is an interesting one. It's a reframing of Gnostic cosmology. And then there's a piece of fiction called The War Wolf, which is about the 100 Years' War.
I've been recommended this book many times, so this might be my sign to get the Werewolf.
It's cool. Yeah, I like it. It's really interesting. Certain works by Steiner have been pretty pivotal for me as well. And that's what I would say off the top of my head. But there's many more that I should really I haven't been reading much recently, if I'm quite honest.
That's okay. We're busy. I mean, like the amount of times that I post videos about things that I have read, and it's just something that was like picked up in high school or college or something. Like I've read many books throughout my life, but at a time, I feel like I read very little compared to what people might expect of me. So I completely understand, you know. There's also a lot of just bouncing around too. Like I'll read an article
Yeah,
from an author, you know,
yeah,
instead of an entire book, and that sort of thing. So
yeah. Or I'll start like 3 books at the same time.
yeah,
Yeah, I travel a lot. I've been traveling a lot over the last few years, and so having books has not been a thing. But I have a lot of
it's
PDFs.
difficult. Yes, yes, the Z library. Thank you, God.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, same. This next question comes from our friend Rogue's Expeditions. He asks, "Where and how will we establish a Neo-Rhodesia for displaced Western folk? Where and how?"
Where now? Wow. Well, the final battle could be in Patagonia, between the forces of good and evil, and we'll win and avert Ragnarok, and the natural resonant harmony of the Earth will be reestablished, and all the 5G towers will be bombed all at once. I think we need to. Well, I think Europe and America need to be, let's say, recorrected. Like, where you can't really abandon ship totally.
Agreed. There's not a lot of
But
other places to go unless you want to try and start again somewhere else that's already populated. You know?
yeah, yeah. But the future could be like incredibly interesting. Like, if the sort of techno states get embedded properly. Who was it? I think it was Elon Musk's uncle or something. Who it was like a Canadian politician that wrote the sort of thesis on the technocracy and how that would look like in the 21st century. And you basically have like the American technate and the Eurasian technate. And so the way we understand national countries and regions could change quite dramatically in the next sort of 20 years. Like
Yeah.
I could envision the EU not being a thing in 10 years' time. Like I think we're in for dramatic change.
Yeah,
I
I
think
think
that's
so, especially with
inevitable.
the interconnectedness of it, the internet, and everybody just sort of knowing what's going on and being able to see and recognize the patterns across the world. There's going to be like everything is just going to happen a lot quicker because of
Yeah,
that. Whatever
yeah.
change, whatever revolution needs to occur is going to happen very quickly.
Yeah, like it feels like we're heading towards some sort of horizon line, and and time is moving quicker because of global interconnectivity,
Yep.
essentially awareness of reality itself. Like 50 years ago, a bomb would go off in Lebanon and nobody would know, and like now everyone can see it immediately,
Yeah.
and this has some sort of strange effect on the collective unconscious. But it does feel like an hourglass where sand is getting closer to the midline, and obviously it runs faster
Or
as
the
it gets
midline
down.
is almost opening, the sand is pouring through more quickly.
Yeah, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Fascinating. This next question comes from Entirely Dust. He asks, "Which era and culture of combat of any kind do you personally find the most interesting and why?" My
Yeah,
yeah,
what do you go?
I was gonna say I'm very fascinated with Bronze Age warfare because I think that it's very commonly misunderstood when we talk about like the aristocratic warrior elites that would have fought in battle, as opposed to because we always come through this cycle of wars being fought by the peasantry or by the nobility, and I think that the Bronze Age is our most recent but yet distant our first written understanding of what like aristocratic warfare looked like. And I think that that's super fascinating because it seems almost entirely antithetical to what we see today.
Yeah. The who were the Saxon guards in Byzantine? What were they called? The
The Varangians.
the
Varangian Guard.
Varangians. Yeah, yeah. I like the
Very cool.
Varangians.
Good answer. Good answer.
They are
Samurai
fascinating.
culture as well. I find it.
Another sort of aristocratic warrior class.
Yeah.
What about you, Dane?
Oh, you stole my thunder on the Bronze Age. As it is so fascinating aesthetically and materially, and in terms of changing social conditions and things. I mean, and there's because we have so much less. It's not like you can read about medieval warfare written a journal of a warrior who fought in battles and get to that personal perspective. We don't really have as much of that in the Bronze Age. The closest we have really is the Iliad,
Yes.
to actually describing it from that level of perspective of detail. But through archaeology and things, we can kind of connect some dots. We see swords, for example, that were manufactured specifically for dueling and not for battlefield contexts, and we don't think of dueling really becoming a thing until the Renaissance. But there's precedent thousands of years ago. And then there's the battlefield, like the battlefield of Talens, where we know a big battle happened, and that's all we know. We know a bit of the
Nothing
DNA,
else.
we have the archaeology, but we don't know who was involved, why they fought, or any of the other, who was the winner. We just don't know. We just know this was a battlefield. So it's fascinating because it's so mysterious, and what we do know can engender so many ideas and theories and concepts. So I will say that. I'll also give a nod to the Renaissance and the early modern period. You're going from knights to guns essentially, but there's a big period in the middle
That transition.
where it's kind of this transition state, and it's also mixed with the European colonization of the Americas and coming into contact with other civilizations across the world. So it's a very dynamic period. So
Yeah. Very cool. This next question, it's sort of just a reference, not so much of a question, but Ismise Dominic is asking, have you done any independent double-blind tests to prove the efficacy of the benefits of the Aquari necklaces? I know that you have some studies linked to the website that people can go check out. Did you want to speak about that a little bit?
Yeah, they can go to the website and check out the testing that we got. We had the testing done by a German lab called Darch Scientific, and it's an independent company. You have to pay for the testing, but that's that's standard procedure. There's no the only way you cannot pay for testing is if you have like a PhD student do it for themselves and they get funding from elsewhere. Otherwise, any supplement you do have to pay for testing. But we didn't pay for results. We just it's part of the protocol. You send them your stuff, and they do testing on our website. We have under the Our Tech page, you can go and find those studies, and it was published in a peer-reviewed journal called Applied Cell Biology. And then if there's questions that he has about that testing, I've also attached our written response to because I have had biochemists saying it's not your testing isn't foolproof or legitimate because of XYZ. So I've tried my best to answer those sort of queries. And
Beautiful.
we look forward to doing more testing in the future when we release new products. But it's a small company. I had to start it off my own back, and these things are quite expensive. So we're happy with the testing we got. It is independent and it did get peer reviewed. So yeah, as far as we're standing now, we're happy with this. But we will go for more testing in the future.
Beautiful. Very good. Next question comes from Pay Money Hatam. He asks, which era of civilization would make you pick the way of the monk over the way of the householder?
Maybe now.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
Well, no,
That's
no, I'm
it.
not. Like, I have a fiance, and does that make me a householder? I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
know.
but I think the older, especially in the Middle Ages, they had the monk quest. Like
Hmm.
as a role in society, some young men would leave home, and in England, for example, they would go to Rome, and then you had the troubadours were like singing monks that would travel across Europe and stuff like that. So I think that we don't have that anymore. Like we have people who go traveling, but it's glorified vacation going to a hostel and getting on Instagram. So it's not really the same
Yes.
thing. But back in the day, they did have this very cool aspect in culture, which was like a kind of aesthetic quest-like element for young men.
Very cool. Nice. We just have two more questions. One comes from the Plastic Skeleton. He asks, "What is your favorite instance of cultures meeting?" My favorite is when Ibn Fadlan meets the Rus. What is yours? I That's a pretty good one because I think thinking
It
of
is a
the
good one.
Scandinavians going all the way into um, Islamic territory
Hmm.
in the Middle East is pretty incredible. You wouldn't think of Vikings having gone all the way there. Maybe I would say um, like Leif Erikson landing in the Americas, meeting the indigenous peoples there. Because
Hmm.
I remember hearing that he had no idea how large the landmass was. He had no idea he had stumbled across the North American continent, and so he thought that the indigenous peoples there, however vast they were, was just like, oh, this entire place is populated by them. But he didn't realize that if he had gone just another like 10 kilometers or so, he would have been in utter wilderness for thousands and thousands of miles, and so they
Yeah,
just left.
that's a really interesting one.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, the Vikings that went to Vinland, so
Mhm.
further north where Greenland like met. What's the northeastern province of Canada called?
Nova
Newfoundland.
Newfoundland.
Scotia. Oh, okay.
No, yeah, Newfoundland, and then down from there. That must be, yeah, landing in the New World and just like,
Imagine.
whoa, where
Yeah.
am I? And just
Hyperboreans meeting other Hyperboreans. Like, that's crazy.
yeah, yeah.
uh, very cool. This last question's a little bit topical. Comes from Jaden8728. He asked, "Is Erling Haaland a good peek into what a Nordic Viking could have been like, or is he just built different?"
Well, I mean, if you take the size of certain swords, there are some swords that were. It was a German one rather than a Viking sword, but
Mhm.
it's enormous. I can't remember the name on the top of my head. Um, there's the story of the Berserker at Stamford Bridge
Yep,
in
yep.
English history.
Made a last
Just
stand against hundreds of
yeah,
Saxons.
yeah. I think obviously Erling Haaland's a big guy, and people generally are bigger now, at least than we were in the last few hundred years. But
Yep.
there's always been circumstances and historical like people who have been enormous.
Yeah.
So I mean, yeah, he's built different because his dad was a professional footballer, his mum was a triathlete, a
Yep.
bit like the NFL player Christian
McCaffrey? Is
McCaffrey.
that it? Yeah.
Again, like both parents professional athletes themselves. So
Yeah.
you're gonna
An
get apex.
unintentional eugenics project.
Yeah, you're gonna get apex genetics.
Yeah, there's always the war over whether or not it is environment and genetics, and I think it's always, of course, a blend of both. Like your genetics are going to give you the framework in which you can reach your Sonnenmensch, and then your actual environment is going to shape whether or not you are capable of achieving that.
Yeah, and when it comes to being an athlete, like your genetics are different value systems. Like the difference between speed and quickness, for example.
Right.
Like quickness is agility, lateral movements compared to straight line speed and that kind of stuff. And different sizes are going to be good for different. It's easier to be quick at 5'10" than it is to be quick at 6'5", for example.
Right. Different adaptations.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So when it comes to just being an athlete, you should play to your genetic strengths.
100%.
Would
Well,
say
yeah, go ahead, Dane.
Holland probably, if you talk more like personality, disposition, I think there's something to be said there for that kind of, as we talked about this a lot in our last episode we filmed that hasn't come out yet, but will be out by the time this is out. That kind of nonchalant, almost gonna go out, see what happens, and does it really well, not easily bothered by things, just kind of a roll with the punches, do what you can. I can see that in a lot of warrior societies in general, that kind of disposition. So maybe in that way he could also be representative.
Yeah, he is very Germanic in his like ancient Germanic tribe in his disposition.
Yeah.
Which is epic. You love to see it. You love to see that being like yesterday I was in the lake and these little kids were like Holland, just shouting Holland. They've got like long blonde hair.
I can see.
Did you have your hair up?
Yeah.
Oh, that's hilarious.
So it's cool. It's nice to see. Obviously, it's nice to see someone who looks the same sort of look as me get some like credit. I think he's a great. Like, he's really the winner culturally of this World Cup.
Oh, 100%. He has captured the hearts and minds of everybody, regardless of who you're cheering for. It's why people were. I mean, unfortunately, they just were eliminated yesterday, but like they had the support of nearly the entire world for many different reasons, but Holland being a huge proponent of that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, guys, this has been one of the greatest conversations I've ever had. This is one of the most fun episodes that we've done, and it's a great chance to finally get to kind of chat face to face instead of just over the phone. We have all of your links and everything linked in the description below. Do you want to just tell people where they can find you and what you have coming up that you're excited about?
Yeah, Disco Orpheus, Disco_Orpheus on Instagram, Disco Orpheus on Twitter and YouTube. And yeah, we just run it like Aquari is my brand. People can go check it out. We're really looking to, in the fall, bring out new lines. We're going to go into gold and silver. And so we've got some really exciting different things coming up later on in the year. Maybe not until early next year, but I'm really excited to get that going, because then we're going to be branching out to different pieces of jewelry as well. Same technology, but different styles. And different pieces of jewelry, like rings and bracelets.
Nice.
and that kind of stuff.
I'm due for a new ring, so I'm excited for that.
It's going to be exciting, and and we'll be going on a trip next month as well, so people can look out for that. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah. We will all be on the same flights together, the three of us. So I'm excited to see the barbarian banter that comes up organically there. Everybody go follow Orpheus on Instagram. Go watch his YouTube videos if you want a more in-depth understanding of Hyperborea and all of the things that we discussed in this podcast. He's got some great videos laid out there, so go check those out. And make sure that you subscribe if you are watching on YouTube, follow if you're watching on Spotify, and continue to follow and chase your dreams. We will see you guys in the next episode.
Thank you.
Peace.